Hello guys! Today I'm going to be talking to you about agency in Yde and Olive, which is a medieval story that is actually part of a bigger epic from medieval France. It's a story that I think recently has gained more popularity among medieval literary scholars, so there's been some more research and analysis done on it as of recently. If you're into medieval literature, medieval history, or queer literature and queer history, then I think you'll like this video and the story Yde and Olive. I highly recommend reading it. I was looking on YouTube and I didn't really find any other video essays on it, and I thought I might talk about it a little bit. So, Yde and Olive. If you have never read this story, I highly recommend reading it, but I'll give you a brief summary. So the story starts with King Florent and his wife Clarice. They end up becoming king and queen after the old king dies, and Clarice ends up pregnant with Yde, and she delivers Yde, but unfortunately dies, and King Florent is super upset, grieves a lot. Yde grows up, and at around the age 15, the king is still mourning, really misses his wife, and he really values Yde's companionship because he kind of sees like his dead wife in Yde because she's their daughter. And this is where it starts to get weird, because basically King Florent refuses most of the suitors that try to marry Yde, and ends up telling like his people that he wants to marry Yde because she reminds him of his wife. Yeah, it's awful. But even his court, they're all like, I don't think you should do that, man. And basically he says, shut up or I'm gonna kill you. So they're like, okay, do what you want. We don't recommend it, but whatever. He ends up telling Yde that you're gonna be my wife. And, Yde is like, whoa. No, I'm not. You're insane. So she ends up taking a warhorse from the stables, disguising herself as a man, and riding off. So after she runs off, because she's disguised as a man, she has a lot more opportunities. She ends up fighting a Spanish army with the Germans, ends up being the only survivor. She outsmarts a group of thieves and speaks out at them. She calls them sons of whores, evil rotten thieves. She ends up in Rome and gets an audience with the king and fights for Rome and is very successful. The king promises Yde his daughter Olive if he proves himself to be worthy, and he does. And Olive is also very infatuated with Yde. After a very successful battle, Olive is very impressed and can't contain her feelings anymore, and goes to her father, the king, and is like, I am in love with him, I need to marry him. And the king's like, of course, you have my blessing, we love Yde, let's plan the wedding right now. And so pretty soon after, they get married. Yde is a little distressed because she's afraid that she's gonna get found out. And so after the wedding, when they enter the bridal chamber, Yde is crying I'm sorry, I have an ailment, I just need to go to bed. And Olive's like, oh, don't worry, don't think that I just want to sleep with you. Honestly, I think that we should wait 15 days when all the guests are gone, so they don't make fun of me. And Yde's like, oh yeah, whatever you want, princess, that's fine. And so some days pass and celebrations happen, and Olive ends up sort of rethinking her statement and becomes every night a little more touchy. Yde knows what she wants and ends up confessing to her that she is a woman, and Olive, she is not very concerned about that. What she tells Yde is that she doesn't need to worry, she's not gonna tell her father, and that like whatever happens, she's in it with her, like their futures are intertwined, like she is not going to abandon Yde. Unfortunately, an attendant overhears this confession and goes to the king and is like, Yde is a woman. And the king is very upset, and so that next morning the king approaches Yde and is like, take off your clothes, we're gonna bathe. And Yde is terrified for obvious reasons, and the king's like, take off your clothes, if what I heard is true, both of you are going to die. Yde, even more frightened, is like, oh my god, like I can't do this. Suddenly, an angel comes down and is like, everyone calm down. Yde, right here, is a man, because God wills it to be so. Like, don't even worry. Also, the king is gonna die in 8 days. Also, Yde and Olive are gonna have a child, and that child is gonna face poverty, and that child is also gonna be named Croissant. And then it leaves. And the story ends with Croissant being conceived. So yeah, that's the story. Now I'm going to get into the even funner part, which is my analysis of the story. So, agency. Let's talk about agency. I'm going to talk about a few different aspects of the story that impact Yde and Olive's agency, including gender, religion, attitudes towards homosexuality in medieval Europe, and also narrative and genre. Starting with gender, this is an instance where Yde actually gains agency when she runs off and presents as a man, because she's able to do much more than she probably would have been able to do if she ran off without doing that. If she wasn't presenting as a man, the likelihood of people recognizing her and sending her back maybe, or just treating her poorly because she's a woman, would have been much higher. But while she's disguised as a man, she's able to do so much more, like fight armies, smack talk thieves, get an audience with the king, marry the king's daughter, become king of Rome. Like, those are not things she could have done if she didn't present as a man. Yde is able to do all of these things and build her way up to such a powerful position because she is presenting as a man and everyone thinks that she's a man. And this is made possible because the world that Yde lives in is a very misogynistic and patriarchal one. Olive also gains a little bit of agency through Yde presenting as a man, because we see that she admits in lines 808 through 809 that she's never been so taken with a man, so it is fitting that I should tell him so. She falls in love with Yde, who she thinks is a man. She confesses that she's never felt that way before, which feels very significant here, where we as readers know that it is not as simple as Yde being a man and Olive being in love with him. Even after Olive finds out that Yde is a woman, she's not very bothered by it. Like, all she says is that, I won't tell my dad. Like, she is very devoted to Yde no matter what, and it's very sweet, and unfortunately a very short moment. But this suggests that gender really wasn't an interest of Olive, because she cared more about character, and she hadn't found Yde's type of character in other men, which also implies that maybe she was more into this more feminine presenting man. The other thing is that we don't really know Yde's thoughts on her own gender. We only really know the things that she says and the things that she does. Like when she is fighting the Spaniards, she says, "Oh, true God, help this poor wretch who became a man to preserve her honor." And so through that, we can infer that her choice, which wasn't really a choice, it was more of a thing she had to do for survival to become a man so she could preserve her honor. That's what she tells us. Because Yde was forced to flee her home and forced to present herself as a man for survival and to be successful as she built herself from the ground up. And so even though, like I said, she's gaining agency through those things, they weren't really her choice. And here's where I want to make a little disclaimer, because there are so many ways you can interpret Yde and her identity and the story in general. This analysis that I'm making is not meant to invalidate, the perception that Yde is a trans character or a queer character, because this story is inherently just very queer overall. My analysis is more to point out the complexity in making those claims, because we don't really know what Yde wanted because of the way her agency is sort of stripped away, and how the narrative and the environment and gender roles are restricting her from being able to express what she wants and do what she wants and make her own choices. So it's hard to really know what she wanted. Maybe she did want what happened at the end, but we don't really know. Anyway, moving on to Yde's marriage to Olive, even that is not of her own free will. When finding out that the king really wants her to marry Olive, she's very distressed because she doesn't want to get found out, obviously. But also, this is where religion comes into play. She, in a way, compares her marriage to Olive to the way her father wanted to marry her. And she does this in a prayer to God, asking him to have pity on her. She says, "Glorious God who resides in Trinity, have pity on this wretch who is being forced to marry. O Florent Father, how badly you erred by not marrying me to some lord, and instead thinking to take me as your own wife. Better to have had me burned." So again, Yde is put in this position that she doesn't really seem to want to be in, but this is based off of her communication with God, which I think is very significant, because I feel that this can be reflective of religious attitudes towards homosexuality, obviously, and the idea of two women getting married. And often things like same-sex relationships and bestiality, incest, were sort of grouped into this unlawful thing. So it makes sense that she feels shame for this and expresses her fear to God, because she doesn't want to be damned for either of those things. But she goes over her choices and ultimately decides to marry Olive, because her only other choice would be to confess and then most likely be sent back to her father or be killed, and she doesn't want to do either of those things. So marrying Olive is, the better option in her mind, and it causes her a lot of stress because of her religion and because of the attitudes towards, two women marrying each other. That is not something that flew back then. This transitions nicely into my next topic, which is the attitudes towards homosexuality in medieval Europe. Now, often in the research that I was doing, especially on medieval attitudes towards homosexuality, they mostly talk about queer men and how queer men were treated and persecuted, which, is also reflective of just the general feeling towards two people of the same sex having sex or being romantically involved. But in my research, I was more curious and looking for sources that talked about the attitudes towards women who had sexual or romantic relationships or encounters with other women, because I feel like I hadn't seen much about that. And of course, I wasn't surprised to find that there's very little documentation on that, because female sexuality is not really taken seriously, and it definitely wasn't a priority when documenting stuff. And also just in general, I found that only 12 cases of female same-sex relations in court had been found by historians for the entire medieval period, which compared to the amount of cases that there are about men, like, that's not very many. But despite this, like, lack of documentation mixed with just lack of attention towards women in general and their sexual interests, we still know that queer women have always existed, and it just wasn't really documented the same way, especially because a lot of the documentation was done by men, which is a whole nother tangent that I could get into, but I'm not going to in this video. But in one of the cases that I found, a woman named Katharina Hetzeldorfer, I definitely butchered that, she was charged because she had sexual relations with another woman where she used a piece of wood to penetrate the other woman. In the article that I was reading, it was discussing how the problem there could have been more that she was going outside of her gender expectations, as she was taking on a more masculine role of penetrating another woman, which I think probably was considered worse than just two women, you know, being maybe more than friends. The act of, like, taking on a masculine role was enough to get her executed. And back to the story, we can see that with Yde being a more masculine presenting woman. I mean, she's literally presenting as a man, but also, you know, she's referred to with she, her pronouns in the story, even as she's presenting as a man. There's gender fluidity there, and she is going outside of her gender expectation, like, to a large extent. She's taking on this male identity, and I mean, we can see, like, it wouldn't fly. Like, she was gonna get burned if the angel hadn't come down. So all that queer medieval history being said, whether queer men or women or in between, people who perform gender or sexuality outside of the norm were not safe. It was a risk to be openly queer because it would result in these harsh consequences, which usually was death. Yde and Olive are living in an environment like this, and so it is impossible for there to be a happy ending where they don't die unless divine intervention happens, where Yde is magically a man. Everyone believes that Yde is a man, and even there, it's hard to say that the angel actually changed anything about Yde. Like, they could have come down and just said that, and no physical change had to happen. What was important there was that everyone else believed that Yde was a man, because then it was okay that Yde was married to Olive. But like I said before, Yde already possessed more socially considered masculine traits, because she had the agency to act outside of the expected feminine gender roles, because she was disguised as a man. Now, she didn't need to physically become a man to possess these traits, and if she wanted to, by all means, but because the world that Yde is living in, which is a very black and white one, that's what needed to happen in order for her to stay married to Olive and to stay alive. Like, to put things into perspective, like how different things were back then to how things are today, there wasn't really room for Yde to be, say, a masculine woman married to another woman. There also wasn't the room for her to realize that she may have wanted to transition to male because she identified more with that. We don't know what Yde wanted. She had no choice in the events that took place in the story. She didn't choose to leave her home. She didn't choose to marry Olive, or to be turned into a man, or for their son to be named Croissant. Which, that's a great name, you know? I question if Yde and Olive, you know, when the angel came down and was like, and you are going to have a son, and his name is Croissant. Like, how do you think they reacted? Were they like, can we talk about this? Like, is that really what we have to name our kid? And I know that the name is probably, like, pronounced different in French, you know, it is a different connotation, but, like, it's kind of funny. No, but anyway, they had no choices in these matters, and even the choices that they did have, like Yde choosing to disguise as a man when she left, that is one that was influenced by the world that she's living in, where she couldn't get as far as she did if she wasn't presenting as a man. Even these illusions of choices are not ones that are fully hers. They were often things that Yde had to do to survive, because otherwise the alternative would not be good to her, or determined by an angel that came down out of the sky. Another thing I found interesting in the story is how the narrator often interjects, and it's kind of funny, honestly. In the middle of narrating something that's happening to Yde, they'll just interject something like, oh God, help her, you know. The narrator is wishing for Yde's safety and protection from God as she goes through all these obstacles, and like clearly roots for Yde. They even are like hating on the attendant who exposed them when they say, and the boy, cursed be his father's soul, came to the king in the paved hall and told him what he heard. And this, to me at least, implies that the narrator's like ideal ending for Yde and Olive is for them to have carried on as they were without being exposed, similarly to how queer people live in the closet. But you know, stories need drama, and so of course they get exposed, and then the only alternative once being exposed is for Yde to become a man, because that's the only acceptable relationship of the time, especially for a couple of their power that is going to rule Rome. The next thing that I wanted to talk about is not an analysis that I fully came up with on my own. I had found this incredible WordPress article by Miranda, Hajduk, about genre and how genre sort of strains the narrative and takes away Yde's agency, which I thought was really interesting because I hadn't thought about how genre impacts the story, but it does. The article is called Take Off Your Textiles Part 2, Yde and Olive, the Remix. If anyone is interested in reading it, it's really good. Basically, they were saying that when Yde flees her father and presents herself as male, she is not only taking on a new gender, but a new genre. And that genre is like a chivalric romance. In Hajduk's own words, by stripping herself of her original textile and donning a new one, she has donned a new text as well, the knightly narrative of the chivalric romance. But like the beginning of Yde and Olive is more following the epic storyline of like the rest of the collection that Yde and Olive is a part of, because it's not just, it doesn't end with Yde and Olive, it does continue, and I believe follows Croissant in the future, so that's interesting, and I'll probably look into that at some point. But Yde in the beginning is, you know, a princess in this epic, and then once she takes on this new gender presentation, she is also taking on a knightly romance. And I'm gonna read from Hajduk's essay because they say it a lot better than I could. It says, at this point, you know, post marrying Olive, Yde's gender fluidity and the dual narratives made possible by it had become so threatening and problematic that it cannot be sustained by the text, but rather has tied the text into such a knot that the generic imperatives of neither genre can be resolved or fulfilled, and the entire text threatens to collapse. Ultimately, the text cannot sustain both narratives, and in an effort to enforce stability and close the gaping holes in the text, the narrator solves the problem by having an angel appear and change Yde and make her into a man. So like, similarly to what I was saying about how society and the attitudes towards queer people at the time impose on the narrative and make this the only option, genre also takes the story and just like strangles it. And I really like the metaphor of tying the narrative into a knot, making it so the only option for an ending is for this angel to come down and just fix everything and make it as society needs it to be. Otherwise, Yde and Olive would have much more of a tragic ending. But yeah, ultimately the text does a really good job at sort of constricting these characters of Yde and Olive into gender expectations while also letting them explore them a little, but in the end, so many choices are made for them without consulting either of them, especially Yde with her gender presentation and gender identity. Like, we don't know how she felt about her own gender identity or what she wanted to identify as. A lot of these things are just forced upon her, unfortunately. So I think that's all I had to say. I think I yapped enough. I really love this story. I had to read it for my medieval and Renaissance literature class at the beginning of the semester, which is why I'm making this video for a project for the class. But it really stuck with me, and I already yapped so much about it to my friends, and I figured, why not make a video to sort of collect my thoughts. Thank you so much for watching and listening to my analysis. If you want more history, art history, literature, analysis stuff, like, please follow. I would love to make more videos like this, especially like just me yapping, because I don't know, I really like this. I also, although I don't know how many people are gonna watch this video that like care about the future of my channel, but I am going to be studying abroad in Rome starting in January, so I'm planning on vlogging there and maybe doing some like art history stuff, because my friend that I'm going with is an art history major, I'm an art history minor, and I don't know, it's just gonna be an adventure, a scary adventure, but I'm very excited and want to document it. So if you're interested in that as well, some study abroad videos, video diaries, video essays, hit that follow button. But yeah, for now, I'll just be here, maybe possibly posting another video essay at the end of the semester, but we'll see. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.